He describes these young breaker boys. When he arrived, he saw these young breaker boys smoking cigarettes and chucking a football around before their 10-hour shift began. So I wrote this song called The Breaker. Well, I work in the breaker and I'm just 9. Told them I was 12. No one asked if I was lying. Picking rock till my nails worn down to the quick. I get 65 cents for a 10-hour shift. Sitting in the screen room digging for slate. It's hot when it's summer, and it's cold when it ain't. I look down from the mountain down to the tracks. Coal train crawls like a snake long and black. Two tall spires through the low-hanging clouds. It's all I can see of my dirty cold town. In a few more years, I'll work the door. Then I'll walk that mile, a mile or more. Big shovel, lamp, sledge, dynamite, drill. 5 blasts a day, empty cars to fill. 45 years, 45 gone. It's back to the breaker if I live that long. I look down from the mountain down to the tracks. Coal train crawls like a snake long and black. Two tall spires through the low-hanging clouds. It's all I can see of my dirty cold town. So obviously things had to change with young children working in the coal mines and the hours that these steel workers worked in the mills. We owe a lot to these people who came before us, these men and women who made great sacrifices so that we can enjoy the America that we know today. And part of the sacrifices they made were simply the sacrifice to unionize in the face of opposition, particularly in my home state of West Virginia, in the Coalfields. Opposition to unions and to organizing was such that these people were subject to random acts of violence. In 1912, in Kanawha County, which is where the state capital of Charleston is, there were miners there on Paint Creek, and they went on strike. Now, of all the sacrifices that these steel workers made, the coal miners had it even worse. Sometimes they were not even paid with American currency for their wages. They were paid with little pieces of paper or coins that they called scrip. And they could only spend that money, their wages, in a store that was owned by the actual company that they worked for. And of course, they lived in houses that were owned by the companies. So when they were accused of organizing, the first thing that would happen is they were thrown from their houses. So these striking miners and their families set up camp for 15 months along the banks of Paint Creek in Kanawha County, where there were some railroad tracks. One night, the sheriff and the deputy and some of the company men steamed through this camp. They bore holes in the side of a boxcar and hitched it up to a locomotive, steamed through the camp, and through the holes in the boxcar, they had their guns, and they just opened fire on these families. Only one person died in that. Luckily, they didn't account for the fact that the train tracks were going to be up on ballast. So the angles of their guns, most of the fire went right overhead. In my state of West Virginia, in Logan County, which is down in the southwest corner of the state, the largest labor uprising in American history took place at a place called Blair Mountain. To understand what happened there, you have to back up just a few years before in a little town of Mingo County called Matewan. In Matewan, the miners there went on strike, and of course the first thing that happened was they were thrown from their houses. But an interesting thing happened there. The local officials, Sid Hatfield, who was the local sheriff, and the mayor of Matewan, Cabell Testerman, they would not side. They were not bought out by the coal companies, and they refused to side with the coal companies, and they refused to allow those companies to send their citizens out of their homes into the streets. Well, the coal companies didn't take kindly to that, and they called the town of Bluefield, and from Bluefield, the Baldwin Felts detectives showed up, and they were heavily armed, and they met Cabell Testerman and Sid Hatfield at the post office, right there at the train depot in front of the post office, and of course a big gun battle broke out. And I believe it was 11 or 12 people died in the Matewan massacre. But Sid Hatfield was uninjured. Now, a few years later, in 1921, they brought up Sid Hatfield on trial in a neighboring county, McDowell County, on some petty gun charges. I don't know what kind of gun charges they had in 1921 in the state of West Virginia. But they brought him up on some kind of charges, and as he walked up the stairs to the McDowell County Courthouse to face trial in the little town of Welch, 15 Baldwin Felts detectives came out from either side of the building and gunned him down with his wife by his side. The miners were so outraged by this that 10,000 civilian miners met just south of the state capital of Charleston and decided they were going to march to Mingo, all the way to Matewan. And they were going to organize Logan and Mingo counties, which were two counties that were not organized yet by the United Mine Workers of America. When they got to Blair Mountain, that was the last obstacle into the town of Logan, and the local sheriff there, Don Chafin, called for reinforcements, and 16,000 federal troops showed up. The battle lasted 3 or 4 days. There's little documented about it, although I've been there with an historian, and he unearthed over 24 shells for me in various locations along the mountain in about 45 minutes' time, most of which we left there so that they can hopefully someday convince the West Virginia government to make it an historical site. But you'll hear casualties from anywhere from less than 50 to over 300 or 400 people. But these miners marched, and if you don't remember anything else about the Battle of Blair Mountain, you will remember this. These miners tied red bandanas around their necks to identify themselves as civilian miners. And that's where we get the term redneck today, at least in its modern usage. Some people will tell you the word was around before then, and it may have been. But when these 16,000 federal troops saw these poor, uneducated mountaineers marching with their red bandanas, that's when it became the slur for the poor and uneducated of Appalachia. So to write a song about an event that's on such a grand scale, I figured the best way to do it would be to tell the story through the eyes of one miner who's going to march. I'll mind your call for union wage. In 17, I left my home for this country's flag. I fought the war. By 21, in my hometown, I weren't welcome in the Legion Hall no more, because I am a union miner. I'll mind your call for union wage. For that wage I'll lay my life when I march down from Marmet, armed with my Colt and Winchester, a red bandana tied about my neck. I am a union miner. I'll mind your call for union wage. 10,000 strong, I'll make my stand. My union brothers, all there with me. We ain't coming home till Sheriff Chafin is hanging from a sour apple tree. I am a union miner, and I'll work all night and day. I am a union miner. I'll mind your call for union wage. I'll mind your call for union wage. Thank you very much. Tracy, do we have any more questions?
Hi, Tom. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what happened in this building here during the strike and the battle and everything else.
Well, I think this fella right here, Charlie, he might be able to answer in more detail about the pump house and specifics. Charlie, do you mind?
Hi, Charlie.